Inviting.
As we keep going. Okay.
I mean,
I see that we have a quorum, and I call this meeting of the Policy and Priorities Committee to order. I have a motion by Councillor King, or Councillor Rivak, seconded by Councillor King, that the agenda for the June 15th, 2015 regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adopted. Any discussion, any changes?
Marvin.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to, at the end, add on a brief discussion of culverts in the town.
5.6.
Oh, 5.6.
And it's a discussion of about culverts?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Since we don't need a seconder at policy, any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Now to the motion that the adoption of the agenda as amended. Any discussion? Is there a further amendment, Councillor Papp?
I'm not sure. I was going to talk to the mayor. I'm at this, just at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm laying in bed and I thought about this wrong thing. I'm thinking about our AMO convention and along marketing and public relations, if we are planning to do anything to promote our town. And maybe that's something we can discuss at another council. I'm just,
You want that added as an
I don't know if it
agenda
falls
item?
under here or falls under general. I just was curious as to see what we're doing at AMO since,
we can ask for,
Since you brought it up, why don't we put it on and
I'll just ask the question. I just would like to know how we can facilitate and put a lot, this came up, some of you remember when we talked about FCM, about the tour and all the rest. I'm just thinking, we got all this good stuff going on. I'll talk about it more. And what we could do to promote our town at AMO.
good idea.
So, to Councillor Papp's addition to the agenda, AMO, town promotional measures. Any discussion? All those in favor of adding that amendment? Thank you. Now
Thank you,
back,
Mr. Chair.
quite well. Back to the motion that we have before us, that the agenda, the amended agenda of the June 15th, 2015 regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adopted. Any further discussion? Not, call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Now, Council, the items that are before us, are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests or general, and the general nature thereof?
No, Mr. Chair.
Madam Clerk, could you so note that? Thank you. I have a motion from Councillor King that the mayor and council receive the Town of Pelham Energy Management Plan, and the committee recommend the Energy Management Plan to council for approval. Discussion.
Straightforward.
Mr. CEO, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to present this policy, or this plan, rather. Council will recall last year we had an interdepartmental team that was looking at environmental issues, and one of the things that the employee team recommended is that we form what is known as a green team. So this year, the green team has now been formed. And I've been pleased to work with the group of employees that have been committed to undertaking some of the large task of environmental stewardship and working with them towards a sort of coherent plan. The first thing that the Green Team did was they have developed this plan. It is a provincially mandated requirement of the town to have an environmental plan. I'm very pleased to present this on their behalf to council for your consideration, and optimistic that it would go to council for approval. Second on the agenda, you'll notice that there is an environmental policy statement. That policy statement is also something that I'm bringing forward on behalf of the employee interdepartmental team, the Green Team, so that we can have some baseline environmental policy on the books, so that we can then proceed as a Green Team and as an interdepartmental team to work on more targeted and strategic environmental efforts to reduce our carbon footprint and to become more environmentally friendly community.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Rivak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really, really like this, but I want some clarity with respect to the policy statement. I take it by the time I've completed reading all of this, that the policy, it will be to have an energy management plan that will be incorporated into all of our activities, and that it will obviously have an impact and guide the development. Is that the policy, or is it this specific plan that is the policy? I was just looking for again, a policy statement that clearly indicates what it is that the intent is.
The policy statement is actually under 5.3. That is the policy statement for the community, and that's the baseline policy that the town would
5.3.
attempt to adhere to. That gives a mandate to the Green Team to pursue environmental stewardship initiatives. This plan is separate, however connected, because it is a requirement of the province, but it's also outlines initiatives and targets and goals that the organization is attempting to meet. And I can say the intention is not only to meet but to exceed, but there is a lot of work between now and achieving those goals.
Okay, so the policy will be the solution statement indicated in 5.3?
Correct.
Okay, so that gives it some framework. I was just trying to work in my mind how the item 5.1 was a policy statement. I appreciate that it's in 5.3, and I accept that very much. Thank you.
Anything else? I had one question, if I may. When I look at the plan, and for the most part, I think it's awesome. It has some pretty far-reaching implications with respect to funding, and particularly when you start getting into looking at new buildings or upgrading our existing facilities and bringing them up to LEED standards and all of that sort of thing. How definitive is this statement in terms of mandating that every new structure that we build, we must meet LEED standards at least at a minimal level?
I think that the point, Mr. Chair, is to say that this is where we ultimately would like to be. It's not a commitment to say that that's where we are now or that's where we're going to be tomorrow. When we look at things like Fire Station number 3 or the community center design, those types of buildings, we're not committed to being a LEED building, but we are saying that we do want to aspire to LEED principles, and I think that's really where the intent is with those types of statements in the plan.
And perhaps as we move forward, then we could gradually incorporate LEEDs, et cetera, into it.
Exactly.
I see, okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Next item of business, I have a motion by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that the presentation by the Treasurer Director of Corporate Services outlining the e-procurement implementation strategy, did I miss something?
She's going to make the presentation.
Oh, you're going to make a presentation, okay. Be received for information. Madam Treasurer, I didn't realize you were going to give us a presentation, but go for it.
Sorry, Gary.
It will be satisfactory, I'm sure.
High praise indeed.
That includes short.
Thank you. Just start the conversation while this is loading up, but this is just a high-level overview of some of the purchasing changes that we're going to be implementing in-house here. Some of the things that we have been doing over the past year is listening to some of the comments about the openness and transparency about the purchasing on the website, our ability to procure items in a timely manner, to get things returned, to have things all in one place, and to be able to do some other high-level stuff that we haven't had the ability to do. So, it's coming. There it is. So what we did with Mara Bray in the purchasing department and discussions with town staff and listening to some of the comments from the residents, we searched best practices that are currently being used in procurement. And this is, all across other municipalities, outside of what municipalities are doing. We researched all sorts of e-software applications and what they could offer to the town. But then we had to have a list of must-haves of what we wanted to come out of an e-procurement software application that we were going to bring in-house. And one of those is in line with the energy plan that was just provided to you, is to make sure that this further reduces the town's carbon footprint. There is the reducing of use of e-materials. For instance, you can go with a vendor and the vendor must wrap in saran wrap instead of all the cardboard boxes, and they become e-friendly, and we give preference to those kind of vendors. Also, reduce costs of performing purchasing processes. We find best practices with the e-procurement software is where the bidders are all on one site, they can see each other bidding. They know what lowest bid is out there. It actually forces the cost of your products to go down. So this is something that we wanted to make sure that we could utilize with a new software application. Greater customer service to the public. That's something that was mentioned many times about having access to documents, having access to the awards. Be transparent and open to the public. Respond to the internal staff needs that we were listening to, and reduce the cost of supplies and services for the town overall. So what we found was that the e-procurement software applications and provide a simple process for organizations to manage all aspects of the procurement process. So it's from cradle to grave when a procurement starts. It manages it all in-house, on-site, in real time, where all the public can view. So that's something that we found would benefit us as an organization. The hosting of the software solutions, we would host it here at the town. And there would be no third parties involved, which are currently what exists with the town. Provide real-time access to all procurement results, allow for reverse bidding, and this is something that's really exciting. I'll explain in more detail later. No fee vendor access, contract management again, no late submissions. E-procurement resolves that issue with vendors, so vendors don't have the ability to not submit their documents properly, because it will warn them, and it will also warn us, and that allows us to make sure that they are submitted properly. Complete transparency to the public again, and then the WSIB and insurance certificate management is a risk issue that this software application will help us resolve. So, simple purchasing processes. As I mentioned, currently when we want to go out to a bid, we send out to multiple vendors through email, and we request a quotation. So one might come back today, another one might not come back for 2 weeks, and then you're constantly having to go on top and reach out to them. It's a time constraining process, and with one purchasing coordinator, it becomes very time management wise hard to manage. So what this software does, it allows you to send out your bid, it allows you to invite bidders into the bid process, and it gives them a timeline when they have to respond by, otherwise the bid closes. That is something that's going to allow them to be focused on submitting their bid in a timely manner, and us being able to manage where all of those bids at. Now, on top of being invited into bid, because if a vendor signs up and says he sells printing materials, and we don't have another vendor or there's another vendor out there that might sell them, but he hasn't acknowledged that, he can still see all the bid opportunities, and they can still bid on the document regardless. So it gives more flexibility in the bid process to the vendors as well, where more and more vendors are able to bid on the same product, where right now you're usually reaching out to just about 3 or 4 to get quotes back in-house. So that helps to reduce the redundancy of work, that process alone, and the bidding process is completely controlled. Another great thing about this system is you are able to communicate with all the vendors by chatting with them through the procurement software. So if there's something in the bid that needs to change, like an addendum, or there's only a certain amount of time left, you're able to send out a message to all the vendors that are invited into that bid or have chosen to bid, and get responses back from them, and document all of that. So the whole process becomes a lot more streamlined with this. And here's an example of what a bid field would look like on screen, where staff would go in and select from a template or templates of bid documents that we have prepared. For certain things, there would be one for more like road construction, and there would be another one for simple things like envelopes for water billings. So for the vendors, also this is something that we've been listening to our vendors. Currently, the vendors have to go to a third-party website to access any of our procurement documents. They have to pay a fee for that service. One of the things we wanted to make sure that if a vendor wanted to take a document here for a tender that they wanted to bid on, that there would be no fee for them. So hosting it in-house on our website allows us to do that without them having to pay a charge for it. They still will download their own documents. There's just no fee to be part of that service. So that's something that we are thrilled to put out to the vendors. And then again, with the bids, they're invited to bid on things that they've documented that they do. So if it's roadways or whatever, they're invited into that bid process, and then again, they can go on to ones that they might not have been invited into either, so it's completely open. The bidding is simpler, and I'll show you a screen that'll show you how easy it is to make sure that all your pricing is getting into this bid software application, where many occasions we'll get a bid price sheet back where it's disjointed on what they actually were bidding on, and you have to go back to the supplier every time and get clarification. So again, this will help streamline that process. Evaluations and awards are posted immediately following review by staff and are online for all of the public and vendors to view. So this is I got this from the software application. They've allowed me to use Oshawa's sample. They're currently using this, but this is where the vendor would log in. It's just a simple login for the vendor. And then they would access a bid document, and this is an example of how easy it is to put your bid pricing quantities in, and it automatically calculates for you, so there's no errors in calculations. And one of the things that we currently are not doing in one system is this contract document management. So contracts with vendors, once awarded, for instance, CIBC is a 5-year contract that we have. When that 5 years is coming up, it's just, red flagging it in your email or whatever. This will actually send you an email 90 days before that contract expires, telling you that it's time to go back out to tender for it. So it manages all the contracts in one place, which is something we've never had before. Looking forward to that. As well as the WSIB and insurance certificates. WSIB, they will audit you. We have just had, all Niagara municipalities just had an audit on this, and they are looking to see your WSIB certificates here for any of the contracts that you've awarded. This allows you to maintain them again in one spot, and it will flag you if that is a year-over-year project saying you need another certificate. Same with the insurance. It will check for compliance with the insurance requirements as well. So reporting, again, the reports are generated right from the application. The history of bid amounts are maintained, and analysis of cost of supplies and services, something we've never had in the detail that we're going to get it. So we will be able to bring reports to council to say, 2 years ago we spent this much on this type of supply, and now we're spending this much. And it's good information to have, especially when that goes down and not up. But, and then vendor history is maintained, how many times the vendors pulled a bid, how many times they've won it, how many issues, performance management or performance bidding you might have with them. And then there's a variety of different reports in there that are at the staff's fingertips that, we could bring to council. This is an example of, the number of contracts, the number of bids, the number of online bids, number of submissions. This is just stats that allows us to see how many vendors are accessing the site and what they're doing with the information. And then this is a typical report. It's not filled in correctly, but this is a report that comes right off the system based on the award. Typically right now we are taking that information, we're throwing it into an Excel spreadsheet, and then PDFing it and attaching it to a CAL report. So this automatically prints that, and it will give you not only the pricing, but all of your evaluation criteria results will also be posted through this process. So one of the biggest things for us was about the openness and transparency. So the public can access the information at any time. They can go in and view all the bid documents that are available. They cannot bid on a document, obviously, unless they're registered, but they are able to see everything. They're able to see all the awards and any other information that was provided to the vendors through a bid process. Again, vendors are invited to bid and can bid when not invited. Vendors can see other bids during online quotation process. And one of those is this new way of bidding is called reverse auctioning, and it's essentially where you give a price out to the public when you ask them to bid. Something like I keep using the water bill as an example, but we know what we paid for them last time, so you can put that as your opening bid, and then they come in and bid it down or bid it at that rate. And that's what we know we got it for last time, and it's something that's new, and it's being used by many organizations for all that small little stuff, that low-lying fruit that you can get out the door, and it's actually helping to drive some of the costs of your supplies down in organizations. So again, evaluation criteria are posted, awarded bids, and then e-procurement aligns with this, our strat plan of being open and transparent, and we're looking forward to rolling this out We have discussed it in-house with SMT, has all been involved in this process along the way. We are presenting it to the all staff at the all staff meeting on Wednesday so that all staff can understand where procurement is going. And we anticipate that it'll be about a 6-week rollout from beginning to end. And that's it.
Questions, comments? Councillor Pat?
Through you, Mr. Chair, several questions. So, and forgive me for the simplicity on these. Number one, no more hard copies, no more written material.
We are not saying that there would be no more hard copies at this
Okay.
time because there's got to be a transition. All vendors are on Bid and Go, and that is the third-party website.
Familiar with them, yeah.
And they do pull it from there electronically already, so, but during the transition time, I do believe that we will still be offering tenders a hard copy at the time. I don't think that there's a call for request for many hard copies here. I know that when I've sent out tenders, I've not had one request to have a hard copy printed to be picked up. So it's probably more on the roads area that would happen.
So it's not being discontinued, but it'll be eventually phased out, so it's totally electronic.
Based on, yeah, right now, the first discussion is going to be with our vendors. I mean, this is something that we've been working on with a lot of them, and there's, they're saying that this is the way that a lot of other organizations are
Right.
going. So we're gonna first get to them and find out what they want. And if they say, well, we still want hard copies, that's what we're gonna do for now. And we're gonna provide them training on the site on how to access the information, but it's very similar to what they already have to do through the other third-party application. This one, they just don't have to pay a fee for.
Follow-up, Councillor Pat?
Sure. I'll have a, so what I'm hearing you say is, I have no problem with the e-procurement, but what I'm wanting to hear is the process of engaging vendors, our members of the Chamber of Commerce, PBA, so the general public know that we're moving towards this system, so they understand how it works. You know where I'm going with, so nobody, it's not a surprise to anybody, and that people are familiar and comfortable with, and obviously within a period of time over whatever that evaluation period is, 5 or 6 months, whatever it takes, we'll know whether people are catching on. I've used the other system. I can tell you with Bendigo, and there's a fee, and it can become very complicated and very frustrating at times. But if this is in-house, what I gather, then we have the control of it, and those that are going to be involved with would understand it fully from A to Z. So that's all. I just want that sort of assurance. So implementation time, you're saying 6 weeks, 6 weeks after you've talked to the vendors, or 6 weeks, not starting now? I'm trying to get clear.
The
Next phase.
The next step after this presentation to council is I have access to all of our vendors. We communicate with them all through email.
Right.
So that's the next step, is to send out where the town is going with e-procurement and get some of their feedback. And then set up a process for getting them automatically, and this is what we can do, is automatically transfer them from the old system onto this new system, setting them up in the vendor registration format. So offering them some open sessions of training on the website, but just talking with the e-solution software and some of the other organizations that have this, like St. Catharines is currently using this system. The transition is very simple for the vendors, and they actually are encouraged by it because of the openness of the whole process. So we have been in talks with St. Catharines on how they transitioned them, and they, same thing, blast email out to all the vendors, here's where we're going with e-procurement, here's what the vendor registration looks like, here's some dates that we're setting up if you want to come in and we can sit and train you, and then we'll take it past that step. The software really would only take about 2 weeks, so that's why I'm giving that extra buffer to make sure that the vendors are all well-informed in advance and
Comfortable with it.
on board with it.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the Treasurer. I'm concerned about unintended consequences, but it sounds to me like any vendors who might be out there perfectly qualified and potentially low cost, but who are not on computer, have already been weeded out by the process we've already got. We don't have any vendors anymore who might be interested in working here who don't communicate with us online, I take it.
There's not one. They will all access the website, and this is the same thing. This is why we want to make sure that if, we will still provide hard copies, but you will always be able to go to our website, and that's where they see all the documents. and see what's up for bid, out for tender, right? So right now, that's currently what they're doing, and if they need the hard copy document, then they'll come to the counter and request it there. So, but they all have to have email access, they have computer access, and we correspond with them all through those channels.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, hypothetically, if somebody was attempting to start up a business, say, cutting grass, and what he owns by way of equipment is his truck and his lawnmower, but not a computer, his opportunity to bid on some work that we may have is pretty limited, or will he always have access to the tender documents to make a bid?
It's not, this will not limit him any more than he has, because if he has not got a computer now, then he would not be able to access what our tenders are.
Right, so we've already weeded out those through the use of the bid and go technology.
Or just the website process, but, I mean, you know, we've been listening to the vendors, and there's not one that has come to us and said, you know, I need to be able to access this, I don't have a computer, and I need, you know, we need to print out these documents. They're only, they come in to get the printed documents, basically when there is it's more on the roadside, when there's big drawings that go with them, and they can't be put through an email system because the PDF is too large or whatever. So those are the only things that, you know, we were hearing. They're going so far with, you know, this e-solutions and e-software that a lot of what St. Catharines gets is the bidding goes back right, you respond right back into the software as well. So your proposal is submitted right through there. So that's, you know, that's another avenue, but it doesn't have to be, it can come to our counter. So those are the things that we will really take that time in transition. It's not gonna be just a cutoff and, you know, anyone that needs a hard copy isn't going to get it. So, and St. Catharines had done the same process.
So just for clarity, if there is someone who wants to start up a business and wants to approach the town to see that we have any work for them to do, they will or will not have, at some point in the future, the ability to come to the counter and pick up a document and make a bid offline. Can't happen.
At this point in time, they will.
But going forward.
Yeah, and I think I can't make that decision today because I have to see how this rolls out and what the needs are.
Yeah, it's a hypothetical, for sure.
So I think, like, if there's a huge demand for something at the counter, then, you know, we're gonna make sure that that vendor is satisfied to some extent. I mean, you know, we'll always find a way to provide them with the documents that they need, for sure.
Okay, I think that's important because in any small town, there are people who have hopes of starting up a business and they start small and they start in an unsophisticated sort of way, and understanding that they may or may not be able to win the bid, but there ought to be some sort of gateway for them into the opportunities.
And most of our vendors have our capital budget binder, and they all call and say, okay, here's when you've got these capital items, when do you think they're going to tender? I mean, that's how close they're watching what's going on here.
Those who have experience and those who are sophisticated. The new kid walking in probably has all that to learn yet. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think I made my point. Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. On one of the slides here, you have host software solutions, no third parties. That doesn't mean we're writing this, we're just hosting it on our website, is that
Just
correct?
hosting. Yeah, I just mean
Okay.
that they don't have to go to a third party and pay for a service anymore.
Okay. And the reverse bidding, that happens on every bid or just some bids or?
Yeah, the reverse bidding won't happen on every bid at this time. Right now, it's going to be on the smaller basic materials and supplies that we need to do our job every single day. The bigger ticket items like the roads projects and stuff like that would not be a reverse bidding opportunity. So it's just like when you use a request for proposal over a request for tender, there's going to be parameters around when we think it's good to do a reverse bidding opportunity.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the treasurer spoke about communicating with the vendors, et cetera. So this doesn't shorten the timeline, does it? You're not going to change timelines. You had said as an example, for instance, somebody, if they bid and they pick it up today and they can they monitor it and all that, you're not going to shorten any timelines as a result of this, are you?
Of the bid process?
Of the bid process.
No, the timeline.
So normally we give 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, 6 weeks. We're still going to stick with that, right?
Yeah, for the regular tenders and the RFPs that go out, we typically give 2 full weeks. So,
Okay.
and it depends on the scale of the project. Obviously, you know, when we did the pre-qualification for design, we gave 4 weeks. So, but for the quotations, the regular quotations, we will be shortening that process because, like I said, when you send out the emails to 3 different vendors, one might not respond for 3 weeks. And, you know, we've got things to get done, so, and they've lost it in their email or whatever. So this process will shorten that up because it'll say it's open for a week, and you must bid within that week. So, and that's what, you know, I mean, the thing is, that's what vendors are asking us to do as well. They're asking us to make sure that there's a timeline, that's a controlled timeline, and right now it's just by email. And
Okay.
it can get all over the place, so.
Okay. Provide real-time access to all procurement results. If it's due on Thursday at 2:00, like, do you anticipate people chiming in on Tuesday, or will they still chime in right at the very end?
They
I'm thinking
will-
of some of the
they're-
larger procurements, you know.
If there's a large one that requires evaluation, then the evaluation has to be done as well, right? So it prints off a sheet with your evaluation criteria?
Well, I'm talking about a tender for now, let's.
Okay,
And then I
tender?
do have a question about scored results.
A tender process will, as soon as the bid is closed, it calculates what's the lowest bid. It will be reviewed by the staff. If it's Andrea's department, the director will review it to make sure that that is a good bid, and it's got all the merits that it needs, and it gets, all we have to do is flick a switch, and it tells you that that bid has been awarded. So typically, you can do that on a typical tender within 5 minutes of the bid closing.
Okay, but we still anticipate that people are going to, it's 2:00 on Thursday, they're gonna put it in at 1:57.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
And just, yeah, some of the bids, like the RFPs, they have scoring, and sometimes there's misunderstanding about scoring. You can take the highest score, but it might be the highest budget amount as well, and of course, the lowest score is probably the lowest budget as well. How are those handled in this system, the RFP type system where there's scoring? Or, for instance, the library, which is going to be a design build, and we're gonna score those folks?
Yes, this would not be a public opening, as they call it, when you receive a bid back, because there has to be an evaluation criteria done on it. So what happens is, when you do your template for your RFP in the software, you create your criteria right in there, and it's posted online, so everybody can see what the evaluation criteria is for it. When the bid closes, or the proposal closes, it prints off the evaluation criteria sheet, and then you sit with the people that are on that evaluation criteria team and review it, and it gets uploaded back through Excel onto the site and posted through the site, and then you determine if, you know, go live for the win of the award of the bid, I mean,
Okay,
okay?
thank you.
Any other? Counselor Drolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question that you probably are going to ask is, what are the costs involved in implementing this program?
There's a licensing fee of, I don't have it exactly in front of me, about $6,000, and then there's about $12,000 in software training and actually software application. So this is roughly about $20,000 in total.
And this has been budgeted, or you're asking, it has been budgeted
No,
for?
it was budgeted in the shared IT department over 2015.
All righty. And the anticipated payback time and what it's going to save us in that? Is there any estimate of that?
Well, I think.
Or is there?
I think like Peter said, you know, I think a good 6-month reevaluation of everything that's happened would help to identify that. I think the payback in-house immediately would be just on the lack of redundancies being done in the work processes and how many hands are in the pot of trying to get quotes in and trying to research other things and so forth. So I'd like to bring it back on several scales to council in a report with, you know, cost savings, like what we were paying for something before we did this, and are we seeing cost savings and the reduced pricing on materials and supplies. Also staff time, the number of people that are involved in the process and how that has been managed and better managed. How the contract documents and managing those now in one spot are being managed. So I think, you know, I would say that within 6 months, we should really be seeing a difference in how we're purchasing here at the town. And a report can come back to council just to, you know, quantify that.
That's the direction I was going at with that question. Thank you.
A question, if Was there anybody else on the table?
Just want to, the
Go ahead.
scoring question about the RFP or whatever. for-
Carry on.
Will that score be, just want to clarify, will that final score be published?
The
And
scores-
that breakdown, or like if there's 5 categories, one's on whatever it is, one's on price, one's on that kind of thing?
This software reports all of them, so if it's price and, you know, experience,
Yeah.
for each firm, they'll all be documented in there.
Because I think some of the hiccups we've had through the years on some of the scoring, somebody says, well, why did I get a B and somebody else got an A? Well, what is it? And you'd have to meet with them separately and talk about all this here and that there and da-da-da-da-da-da. So, okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? No? In that case, I'd like to ask a couple questions. Is this software in alignment with our procurement policy? Or do we have to bring an amendment to that policy in order to proceed with this?
There is just the avenue of bidding online. That is not part of the original policy, but in reading the policy, I'm not sure, I don't think it needs to come back to council. I'm working with Darren to clarify that and Nancy, because when we developed this policy, we allowed for electronic use, you know, with the bidding go and so forth. So I'm confident that we probably don't need to come back unless we start changing, like no hard copies at all, and it can come back to another PMP meeting.
Okay. Second question is, the licensing fee, does it include upgrades? Is that built into the fee on going forward basis, so we don't have to pay for upgrades as
correct.
times change?
Yeah.
So that's in there. And the last question is, does this e-bidding interface with our financial management system so that it's automatically moved over into the budgetary columns and also into the payment columns and all that sort of stuff? Is there an interface between the two?
There is no interface, no.
So you have to manually move things over and, okay, thank you.
I mean, you can, sorry, you can download all the documents and reports and criteria from this software into Excel. And in iCity, our financial management system, I can upload those as well. So it's just creating the template, but there's not that direct link. So we can get around it by getting information up into iCity. And, you know, what we'll want to do is download it so that a PO is automatically created, but that's my story for another day, so.
That's what I was sort of thinking.
Yeah.
That it would facilitate the whole movement. Anything else, council? No? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. I have a motion by Councillor Junkin that the Policy and Priorities Committee receive the Environmental Policy Statement and that Policy and Priorities Committee recommend the policy statement to the regular council for approval. Discussion. Mayor Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the solution statement, it says the town of Pelham is committed to an environmental policy that will create. Why don't we just say is committed to creating a culture of sustainability and reducing environmental impact? We don't have to say that we're committed to a policy, we just say what we're committed to. So I'd ask that that be refined.
Is that okay with you, Mr. CA?
Not up to
You
me.
can wordsmith that?
I think it's an excellent suggestion from the mayor.
That would mean that you
You
get more
work
money
closely with the
for
mayor, do you?
environmental practices.
You're working closely with the mayor,
As all members of council, Mr. Short.
That's right, that's good. I'm glad you qualified that.
Good comeback.
I like that.
Any other
So
comments?
I don't know if you need an amendment, if we just ask staff to clarify. that.
We'll clarify it, Mr. Chair, and then add that right for the next council meeting.
Any other comments? The only comment I had is that I'm not 100% clear on all the key facts. It just doesn't seem to be, it just seems unclear to me. And like, for example, we just have the point, Green Energy Act 2009. But it doesn't mean anything to me because I don't really know the Green Energy Act 2009. So, you know, are there sections of that act that are pertinent to this particular
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Green Energy Act is the one that mandates the environmental plan that council's just endorsed, or committee's just endorsed, rather. So yeah, I mean, it's a fact because it's predicated on the act and the provincial requirements, but as key facts, we didn't want to print the whole act. I mean,
No.
it's just a reference. That's really what it was designed to do. This is a sort of a higher level policy. It's not meant to be specific. It just provides that mandate so that the green team has a policy that they can move forward with green initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Very good. All right, he's got the answers. I've got the questions. He's got the answers. Call the question. All those in favor?
It's important that we know our roles.
Carried. Okay, motion by Councilor Ribbiak, seconded Councilor King, that the Policy and Priorities Committee receive the issue summary report describing the virtual private network remote access policy, and that committee recommend to council that the virtual private network remote access policy be approved. Discussion. Councilor Ribbiak.
In reading this, it makes perfect sense, and I can see how this would be of tremendous benefit. But there was some fair amount of discussion in the report about the need to keep things confidential, and it just strikes me that technologies exist or have existed for some time. I seem to recall them from years back, in which things like passwords, in fact, don't need to be memorized and don't need to be shared. There's these fobs that used to exist that would give you numbers, and they were in perfect sync with the host, so that you have a different password in effect every time you want to use it, and it's available. Just wondering whether any thought was given to getting through the issue of confidentiality, technically by doing other things that are available to do that. It just seemed like the amount of discussion that there was around confidentiality indicated that this was a matter of extreme concern to the authors of the report.
Okay. Who would like to address that? Madam Treasurer?
This is something that through, sorry, Mr. Chair. We recently just watched some webinars on risk management with respect to passwords and security of networks, and actually using the virtual private network system is much more secure for us than people taking home key fobs and or whatever these things are called, and using them because they're not encrypted and the data is unsecure. So, but Mike, our IT coordinator or manager, is working on tightening up the password policy. It's in a different umbrella. It's already been rewritten in the past, and making those changes in-house about things changing on a constant basis so that you're not always having the same password. And the importance on the confidentiality is here is that sometimes staff might think it's simple to just give someone else your password so they can access something, but they don't realize what they're jeopardizing when they do that. So we just wanted to reinforce that when staff are using the VPN network to log in from home, that they're bound by this policy and they can't go outside of it. But we are definitely working on tightening up all those other areas too that are concerning Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the
Any other
Treasurer.
discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Motion by Councillor Papp that committee recommend to council approval of the updated site plan control process, site plan manual, and respective site plan fees as described in issue summary report number 2015-05-27004, presented at the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole. That should be policy and priority. And further, that committee recommend to council approval of the following draft town consolidated bylaws and/or bylaw amendments to align with the updated site plan process and site plan manual. 1, site plan control bylaw. 2, fees bylaw. 3, fencing bylaw. 4, signs bylaw. And further, that committee directs planning staff to prepare the respective bylaws at the earliest opportunity for council's consideration. Discussion. Councillor Papp.
I welcome this through you, Mr. Chair. This is something that we've been pushing for quite a while. Some of us who've been here have heard this over the years of the time it takes, the frustration, the bureaucracy, and what it ultimately ends up is what's the best methodology in order to get site plans approved properly and within the context and the, if you want to call it, to the mutual benefit of both the developer and the community. So I'm very pleased to see this. My basic question is that it's getting back to getting the community engaged and involved. And that is, generally speaking, once you prepare these bylaws, will there be an opportunity, or will we be sharing with our key stakeholders how this is going to unfold? Because I think they'll be very interested in seeing this and knowing that we've actually moved ahead with this and completed it. So congratulations. I really liked how it's laid out, and I like the timelines. I like how things are going to move through very, how to say, facetiously, or in a way in which it does not bog the things down. As some of us know, over the years, we've had stuff that's been delayed, and now the time has come for us to be aggressive, particularly, as you said, Mr. CEO, we're about to launch and move on a major project down the street here, and in Fenwick as well. And this will set the groundwork, I think, and the mandate to move ahead. So I'm just curious of how we would, not curious, I'd like to know the steps in engaging or informing our key stakeholders.
Mr.
Chair? Mr. Planner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. If we are endorsed through council at the subsequent meeting, we'll be going out to our stakeholders and providing both a digital and a hard copy of the manual to all the stakeholders, which we previously solicited for input into this process. In addition, prior to this meeting tonight, I sent a blitz email out to everyone who was in attendance at that meeting, that this topic would be on this evening, and a copy of the manual is on our current website to be reviewed. So the information is out there, but we will be on that extra step to invite our stakeholders to ask questions or clarifications wherever is needed.
Very sad. That's what I needed to hear, and just so that the general public will know that we're taking the step. It'll be approved by council at July 6th, and this is the new methodology, and if there's feedback, it's very important. So congratulations. It's been a long time coming.
Thank you.
Councilor Ribbiak, I had you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to comment. I attended the public meeting that the planning department held on this, and had the opportunity to chat with a number of developers who were also in attendance and looking at this thing. It was very, very well accepted. The notion that, for example, developers are able to sit down at one time with everybody, understand what the requirements are, be able to understand what they would have to produce, what they would have to pay, et cetera, was well accepted. But even more of use to them was the notion of the timelines, and that within a period of 6 to 7 weeks, if they're living up to their end of it, they would get their documents in place and be able to move forward. I think was something that they really welcome. So I don't know whether any changes were made to the document that we saw in the presentation, but even that document, if it's here unchanged, was very clear. The flow chart was extremely informative and covered all the points. So I'm going to echo Councillor Papp's view that this is something that I think is going to be extremely useful and has been something that will be welcomed by our developer community, and we may become a much more desirable community to do business in than perhaps we were before as a result of this kind of work. So I'm very, very happy with it.
Thank you. Councilor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not to be redundant, but the communication that was involved in the creation of this is to be complimented. You did a terrific job by consulting with these folks first, listening to them, speaking with them, and now getting the word out. One question that I do have, the anticipated or estimated time is, as was mentioned before, between 6 to 7 weeks in getting the process if all the ducks are in the row. What is the current timeline of people that have to wait? This is, something to show, celebrate the improvement that we're anticipating with this.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We have one application that's over a year. Generally, they're about 4 months. So this is quite a leap of progress.
And this is something I think is very worthwhile mentioning and celebrating, as I like to celebrate things. So congratulations on that. Just wondering, also, if I may, Mr. Chair, with the second, it deals in one of the clauses with energy and environmental conservation and so on and so forth. Would it be prudent if this council was to build on that a little bit and say if in fact these incentives that we may be able to offer if people follow these things, would that be something that could be looked at a future date or added to that, just to try to encourage folks to become involved in what we feel is a very important thing? We've entertained that today ourselves, and trying to put that through to the public and get it involved in any future developments.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that we could, through the pre-consultation process, that we could introduce the topic. I don't know if the manual and the process is the right vehicle to get that message across, but obviously we can communicate at that point anyways.
Okay. And then perhaps we could build on that in the future after this comes through, if the feedback from the community in your pre-consult does indicate that there's an appetite for this, that we could perhaps consider later. Okay, just food for thought. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Wondered if legal has seen this, needs to see it. As I was reading through it, I thought some of the definitions, for instance, it talks about an owner, no definition for owners that need to be defined. Just kind of those things were going through my head as I was fine-tooth combing the document. Is this something that needs to go to legal or should go to legal?
For you, Mr. Chair, these are guidelines, so they're not strict rules that are black and white. They're interpretive. So when someone comes through, the objective, I view this as council's criteria for development. These are the objectives of council, and the applicant needs to, as best possible and practical, meet those objectives before they'll get endorsement to build their site. So in terms of the manual itself, going through legal, this, if I may add as well, I prepared this type of manual. Each municipality has their own flavors and that, but I prepared this 4 times for different municipalities I've worked for, and I have taken this through legal previously. I'm confident in the work here, but I'm more than willing to take it through council as well, or through legal counsel as well, if that's the opinion of council here. But again, it has been vetted through previous municipalities I worked for, and the material in it is very similar, and some are the same. It's a best practice document, and it has been applied and reviewed before.
Okay, so they are guidelines. Some of the feedback I've heard is that they're too, I'll say, restrictive. Of course, that's from the development community. There is a comment, it's sort of buried in here, I'm trying to find it, but talking about an appeal mechanism. I would think that it says, oh, you can take it to council or the OMB, and that's sort of it. Just wondering if that needs to be, I'll say, beefed up a little. Should there be a section appeal mechanism? I know you don't want to shine light on it, but if these are guidelines, somebody disagrees with you, there's a lot of shall meet the satisfaction of the director of community planning and development.
So on 2 notes there, the appeal process, if council deems to delegate this to staff level, then it's staff's obligation to make sure that these criteria are met as best practical and possible. What that means is it's not a give and take situation. It's if you can't achieve these because of some physical mechanism, we can understand and we can move forward with that. But if you just don't want to, that's not necessarily an excuse. You won't be getting endorsement from staff if it's delegated for site plan approval at that point. In my 20 years career, I've never denied or refused site plan approval. It's always been a work in progress. We're always going to fix it or tweak it or find a solution to a problem. Just because a developer can't do something and the town says you have to do it doesn't mean it's black and white. There may be another solution out there as long as you investigate and work with the developer to achieve the solution. And from the staff's point of view, the solution also needs to benefit not only the developer, but also the community and the people who live in that area. And it's a tough tightrope to walk along sometimes. But this manual will give us the criteria to achieve that, I believe. The second point was the appeal process. If the applicant, and this, the site plan process is not a public process per se, in the Plan Act, it's between the developer and the town only.
Right.
And that's been designed that way because of NIMBYism, because although something may be a good development for the town, someone who lives next door to it may not like it and stifle the process. So the Plan Act allows council to delegate these to staff level, thereby taking the politics and the NIMBYism out of the process, which were inherently weren't supposed to be in there. So if there is an appeal by the developer, he doesn't like how fast this is moving, or he doesn't like the decision of the delegate authority, they go through the Ontario Municipal Board, which will clarify. And again, anytime I've ever been approached by the it's always been supported based on the criteria that we have in this manual. I don't know if I've answered your question fully.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor?
thank you. That helps. Mr. Chair, just, I'm looking at this and I read it, it's very specific. So here's an example. Pre-consultation meetings, which are great and needed, will generally be held, I note the word generally, be held on the first and third Thursday of each month. Why wouldn't the manual say held at least twice monthly? And then you publicize, like, do you have to come back to us with an amendment if you're gonna change it to the second and fourth? That kind of idea. And that's not the only example, that's one example that I happen to have on this page, but it seems like a lot of it is, you know, official plan 2014. Well, why don't you just say official plan, and if it changes, then it changes. Is there a necessity out of writing this that it has to be that prescriptive?
So through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of the pre-consultation dates, they're to piggyback on dates that we have currently for pre-consultations of other planning matters, so it really, they're set and we use them. I mean, if there is an event, we're not going to deny a developer to meet with us a pre-consultation, but because of the method, we want to organize it with a lot of different participants than we typically have. So we almost need to arrange their calendars in advance. So we have,
of course.
yeah, so that's,
I understand it, and I applaud you for having a pre-consultation. I might jump in. I'm just saying, does it have to be codified in here to say it's the first and third Thursday? What if you change it to Wednesdays? That's all I'm asking. Does it have to be so, just say twice a month?
so
Whatever.
to be more general on the policy, on the manual itself, I've written this myself, so I put in some specific information as well as some general information and mixed it together. The specific information there is because there's a reason behind, or criteria that needs to be met, or a principle line behind what's here, and it's specific for a reason that's something that we're pretty firm on, that's something that needs to be met. The example of the meeting dates, it's firm because we have to organize outside agencies to come in here. So if you miss one meeting, we'll put you to the next one, but to put a special meeting, we could probably arrange it, but it'd have to take some special organization to get everybody else involved and their calendars set. So to go back to your question, it is specific in certain areas and is general in other areas. Again, these are guidelines, but it gives the developers hints as well as information as to what are the important aspects of this site plan process that they need to touch upon and meet to meet our expectations.
Thank you. The pre-consultation meeting, one of the things that I've heard, everybody on council's heard, I'm sure, is developers, anybody, whether they're the guy with or without the computer, they want a piece of paper with tell me what I have to do to get to the pre-consultation, and tell me what I have to do after that. Everybody sign off on it, and we all agree, and if something crazy comes up at the last minute, you know what, too bad. This is what we agreed to, that kind of idea. I note that there is the chart here, Mr. Chair, in terms of the timelines, but I'm wondering if that's part of the whole process. We don't have, I don't think that form's in this package, and I'm not saying it should be. Is that the direction we're going with this?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We have some standard criteria as to what they need to provide us to have a useful pre-consultation meeting. So a concept design of what they want, so
Yeah.
we can visually see it. You know, that type of information, we don't need the studies and all at this point because it's conceptual. The timing starts when the application is submitted. but the pre-consultation is going to cut that timing down. So we don't have a set project or regimented process to get that pre-consultation set. It's just come to the counter. You normally have a discussion if you're not new to the process. If you're used to the process, you just submit your pre-consultation request, and we'd have you set in the meeting. It's the same process we would use for C of A, for zoning bylaw amendments, for official plan amendments, subdivisions that we have now. It's essentially the same pre-consultation as we'd have for any other document, just happens to be site plan process.
Okay, I guess what I'm hearing on all that is folks want a piece of paper, because sometimes, not saying under you being director, but in the past, somebody said, oh, I didn't know I had to do a blah, blah, blah. And so we either say, yes, we did tell you had to do a blah, 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 or we don't, but we don't have any paperwork to back it up. Can that be part of this process? Maybe I'm going off, Mr. Chair, I apologize.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, as for Mr. Mayor, you're very insightful. It's actually you're jumping the gun. So this process would be.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Pardon me?
Flattery will get you everywhere.
This process will be initiated, set up, brought up to the stakeholders group. We actually have a program where we're going to be looking at all our application forms, including pre-consultation, as well as commenting as a result of pre-consultation meetings. And the form exactly as you said, we're going to be checking off things that we need, plans, studies, etc. We're going to be putting comments in like we do now into the pre-consultation comments. They'll be sent out within the time frame to the applicant so he knows what he needs. Now, one thing you said though is this is the letter we're signing off on it. This is it. If something comes up, tough. That's not the approach that we take now or in the future. Sometimes when other agencies or someone reviews something was an oversight or something was missed, and that form or the pre-consultation is to give you all the known or obvious issues at hand. Sometimes we can go in a little bit deeper because it is conceptual at that point. But there's a provision in there that if we find something that negate or requires a further study or something, then there may be an obligation to complete that because the thought process on that development isn't complete without that.
Okay, well, I think we talked about communication earlier. I think that's an important point to communicate and say, look, by signing this, if that's what you're saying, something might develop that we don't know of right now, but this is, of what we know right now, this is what this document captures it. I was surprised to see on the Schedule A site plan control approval process that councilors will be circulates application to councilors and others who may be affected.
Mr. Chair, that's my standard practice. If there's an application coming into a ward of a councillor, typically they'd like to be notified of it because when development or something occurs, the first phone call they make is to their councillors. So it's more of a courtesy that I send the application to councillors. Now, if council decides that they don't like that approach or don't want that approach, by all means we can revise it because this is your process that we're initiating here. But it's just more of a heads up so that you know what phone calls you may be getting on what topics.
Probably good. Thank you for explaining the rationale. Under interpretation, when it talks about there's this plan, there's that plan, there's this site plan, Director of Community Planning and Development shall determine which policy is paramount. Under 1.0, what's this under? Schedule B.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, sometimes there may be a situation, this has been structured so there's likely not a situation, but in the event that there's a situation where there's 2 or 3 documents that may contradict each other, then the approval authority's responsibility is to determine which document is paramount and apply the set principles.
So, okay, shall determine, it's more than a guideline, it shall determine.
This approval authority shall determine which one they're going to apply, because that approval authority, if appealed, needs to go to the board and present their case as to why they made the decision they did or why they presented the argument that they did.
Okay. Under 372 and 373, it talks about two block lengths for neighborhood character and streetscape character. I'm thinking of 2 block lengths in Pelham, Font Hills downtown, Fenwick's downtown. I mean, that's a long way. And I'm thinking about this I'll call it the 25% rule, where you have to be 300 300 meters, I think, or whatever it is. So is 2 blocks too long, or should it be 1 block? Why 2 blocks?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
In all directions, right?
It'll be on the frontage of the street it's on, but we will take in considerations neighboring properties in the rear, whatever.
So give me an example. Something's downtown Fawn Hill. You're going to go 2 blocks, right here, right on Pelham Street.
Yep, so we have forest green
Yep.
designs, and they want to redevelop. We're gonna, instead of looking at the immediate buildings beside them and say, emulate what's beside you, maybe the things beside them aren't very good. I'm not saying they are or not, but I'm saying some people may assume that they're not, some people may assume they are. But we need a wider spectrum of qualities, materials, designs, et cetera, to be able to pick from to make a modern, not modern isn't modern art, but modern as in new technology, new thoughts, new processes, and look at the streets in both directions and allow us the palette to build upon a quality development. So that's why we look at 2 blocks, and that's an industry standard that's
Okay.
used.
Okay, that's helpful. I have other, just wondering about the parking. There's some interesting things in there about 18 consecutive parking spaces in a row. Is that the right number? Is that the standard?
So again, to you, Mr. Chair, if I can assist with your concerns, all the criteria and the principles really out of this site plan have not been developed individually for each municipality I've worked at in the past. They've been compiled through the breadth of my career, through best practices that I've noticed and picked up upon and also solicited. So this manual here really relies on the best practices in Ontario as to how the site plan is done. So it's not, we just haven't picked 2 blocks, we haven't picked the number of parking spaces. It's almost, it's not scientific, but it's almost proven theory how good development should be done. And a lot of the CNU, the Congress of New Urbanism, conferences that we've attended at the town here, they base their good quality designs and good neighborhood designs on a lot of these principles that are in the site plan, and that's what I'm trying to promote to council, and hopefully council endorses the site plan manual so we can move ahead with this process.
Okay, I think I have one other. Where is it here? The drive-through stacking 12 spaces. Page 32. That's a lot of drive-through. Think about new urbanism, and we got 12 cars waiting.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I agree with your sentiment. It is a lot. There are uses out there that sometimes use more than that, especially in the morning at peak periods. And we can't regulate those uses. And those uses sometimes demand, as an industry standard, drive-throughs. We have in East Font Hill, there's proposed developments which incorporate drive-throughs. And through reviewing that, we've compared the number of drive-throughs which they're proposing. 12 fits that. 12 may be too much for other locations, and that's something we'll work on with the applicant. Typically, businesses don't want as many spaces. They want to limit them, even though they may need them, because it impacts the parking area, impacts the aisle widths to get to the parking areas, stifles customer or pedestrian traffic throughout the parking lot.
That's what I'm thinking about.
So 12 parking spaces you can almost count on one hand the numbers of businesses that use drive-throughs nowadays. Okay, they're well established, and some of them require more than 12 spaces. So we're trying to say here that you have to have a minimum of 12 spaces, which is almost the threshold between those who need it and those who don't.
Okay. I guess I know I said the other one was final, but just the clarity from Councillor Papp in terms of how this is moving. So this is, you're recommending for approval
Recommendation,
to go to council,
yes.
and then council's going to approve this, and then we're going to go out to the community with it, or are we going to say, okay, committee's going to say, yeah, let's approve it or recommend it, and then, I guess Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking about how do we get that feedback? If we go and approve it and say, there it is, it's done, and then we have to amend, I don't know.
That's good you asked that. I was going to ask the
Yeah,
exact
well, I'll
same
let
question.
you,
I was
maybe you're
thinking
gonna
along
word
the
it better
same
than I
lines.
am.
If we adopt the motion as it is here, it appears that what we have on our desk will go through to council, regardless of whatever feedback comes back from the community. Because it's one thing to hold a public meeting and ask for feedback. It's another thing when it's imminent to be adopted. There might be more urgency to some people to comment that might be worthwhile comments. So how will we flex the system to allow for that?
Through Mr. Chair, so we did have the public open house, which we received comments on, and most of those comments were edits to the manual, which have been updated. The ones that promoted a good site plan process and that were incorporated, obviously. What I did is I did a blitz email, as I suggested, to all the development community who made the comments and who were whether they made them or not, were participating in the open house ahead of this meeting, so that they would have an opportunity to either attend this meeting, write into the meeting to the clerk, request delegation at council, et cetera, et cetera. None of that has been done, and as a matter of fact, the development community that I've spoken with is generally in favor of this. I mean, some development community members aren't fond of securities and that, they don't feel that they should provide securities at all, but there are reasons for all that as well. So that's more of a general, specific comment, but generally they're pleased with it because they're looking forward to a faster process. Now, in terms of spilling it out or rolling it out, if it's endorsed this evening by PMP and it goes to council for recommendation, then another email will go to the development community saying priorities and PMP has endorsed this and is going to council at this date for final approval of the procedure as well as the bylaws. So the development community will have the knowledge that it's out there. I'll be working with, I haven't spoken with Anna yet, but I will work with Anna about putting something out there on our website, providing copies at the desk, et cetera, et cetera.
Mr. CEO, you wanted to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might recommend it to committee that in light of the collaboration and the communication desires of council, that what we might propose is to notify the development community, which the director has indicated, but to have a final follow-up meeting so that we can communicate directly with the development community prior to recommending or prior to loading this onto a regular council agenda. And I think that would just give some finality, and it would give us an opportunity to have that final communication, if that would work.
Good.
I like that. Anyone else feel the same?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, kudos to you. There's a lot of work that went into this, but to be, how could I say, to make sure that we're constantly engaging, because it's a very important group, not that nobody else, but we've had a lot of issues over the years. It would be worthwhile to have one more. I couldn't agree, Mr. CEO. One more public face-to-face with them, say, here it is, it's done, we're ready to go. Tell us what you like or don't like. What I also heard is that, as I mentioned, and the treasurer mentioned too, you're implementing a new process. After 5 or 6 months, you'll see how this is going to work, because you're going to have a couple of more coming down, right? And then you can come back and say to us, these are the things that need to be tweaked. So the document is resilient, that if it needs to be altered, then we can alter it. It's not set in stone. But I couldn't agree with my colleagues. I think are on the same, that we do that one final discussion with them, and then we'll we'll take it from there. It's not going to hurt, what, 2 weeks?
No.
So it comes back on the 20th of July. It's a very important document. I mean, it's probably one of the most important we've had, aside from, official plan and others, but we've been waiting a long time for this.
If I may, through Mr. Chair.
Yes, Kerry.
To give proper notification and organize a date and have the hearing, it may be just slightly longer than the 22nd, as you suggested.
I'm not worried about it. I'll
Okay.
leave it up to your discretion. What we're saying to you is we're giving you instructions or direction to say, take the time you need, and you feel comfortable, and they feel, so you can sit down and they have one good look at it and say, okay, this is that, just like the mayor pointed out some areas, come back and say, okay, we made those changes, now we're ready to launch. I would rather do that, we do that together with them and not, just, no offense. You send out an email and say it's done, bada bing, bada boom. They come in there and they say, you never talked to us. You never had that. We've had experiences like that. And we've been very, very good over the last number of years to that type of collaboration engagement. So I would say take what you need.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, committee, is that we need an amendment to this motion because it directs it to go directly to council. So we need to insert a,
Do you have a date on
there is no date. It says planning staff prepare respective bylaws at the earliest opportunity for council consideration. But actually what we want is another public engagement.
Yeah.
And then maybe to target for the first meeting in August.
Yeah, you have to watch this paragraph. It's this one that gives the action to approve.
Just take that part.
Yeah, just
And we'll just drop the,
forget the bottom.
and further direct committee. Okay?
What do you recommend?
So I think what our clerk has recommended is that we would just drop and further that committee directs planning staff to prepare respective bylaws at the earliest convenience for council consideration. So that the first part would stand. Right? No, you're not saying that.
That we,
No, through you,
We
Mr.
would drop
Chair.
this.
The second paragraph states that the committee recommended council approval of the updated site plan control. That's the one that gives the action that would normally go to the next council meeting.
So we would drop that.
So I would suggest that,
Maybe some sort of amendment, Mr. Chair. We take the first paragraph that we receive it, then it would be amended to say that this committee recommends that staff hold another open house or
public
public
open house.
consultation or whatever it is,
Okay.
and come back to council. I mean, I don't want to, we could approve it in principle,
No,
But-
because there might be some things that
Yeah.
have to be changed. So basically what we're going to do is direct staff to hold a public meeting.
defer all this,
to-
subject to defer all of this,
could do-
subject
defer the
to
whole
an
thing.
open house or public meeting.
That might be the simplest.
Yeah, I think so. I'll move that.
You don't like that either. Do you like that?
It's not up to me, Mr. Chairman.
I see
I'm
you
just,
go,
I'm just,
"No,
no,
no,
I'm
no."
just trying to
The
figure out the
committee
simplest
recommends
way.
council approval. See that?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd just like to clarify.
Carry.
Whether the council prefers a public meeting, or the stakeholder open house meeting that we had.
Stakeholder open house.
stakeholder open
Or
house.
open house.
It's a
would be fine.
consultation.
Yeah,
Consultation.
consultation.
Yeah.
I think that we direct staff to undertake a stakeholder open house and report back to committee.
Back to council.
Council, yeah, you don't have to come back through here. When you're
Yeah,
ready.
perfect.
So we probably don't even need this. Do we? You just,
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I might just suggest that it says, and further that the committee directs planning staff to prepare the respective bylaws once a final consultation with the development
Right.
community has occurred.
Right,
And and then come back to council. I think that's what you're going to say. Is that correct?
that's correct.
once a final consultation
With the development community.
with the development committee.
Here comes
Good. Community. We're gonna drop the first part, 2 paragraphs, because that's recommending to council that we adopt what we have in front of us, which is not what we're saying. We're saying have the second consultation, and that would be what we would recommend if there was any tweaks, right? I mean, if you read that, that's what that says.
You would just take, sorry.
that's an official resolution sheet. Maybe you can write on this.
It's right on there. Sorry, folks, but we gotta get it right.
Just remove the second paragraph. And by adding the consultation piece in between, that does it, because the bylaw will come after the consultation, the public consultation.
Pending. Could do recommended council approval pending. There's lots of ways to skin the cat, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Exactly.
You could say recommended council pending.
A regular council meeting.
Okay, we'll try this. How about this? That Policy and Priorities Committee receive the issue summary report outlining the site plan process, site plan control manual, and respective site plan fees, and that committee recommend to council approval of the updated site plan control process, site plan manual, and respective site plan fees as described in the issue summary report, presented at a regular meeting of council. And further, that the committee recommend to council approval of following draft consolidated bylaws and bylaw amendments. See, that's,
If I may, Mr. Chair, we could just change approval. So in the second paragraph, that council recommend to council consideration of the updated site plan manual. So then it leaves it to council to consider it or not. Or does the committee have to recommend?
No, it could go directly to council,
You recommend for consideration.
couldn't it, Nancy? Can we take this right directly to council after the consultation?
Sure you can.
Mr. Chair, as council is aware, when committee makes a recommendation, it goes to the next council meeting. So I just want to make sure that the recommendation that does go forward to council on July the 6th is what council is looking for. So if this recommendation goes forward, it would be to approve the updated site plan control process, the manual, and fees,
Plus this.
plus
Okay,
the
so-
remainder, that's right.
If I may, if you take the resolution off here, I could bring another report back to a committee, whether it's committee of the whole or PNP, and then that committee may be able to recommend.
Maybe just refer it back to staff.
I think that makes more sense to me. Don't you agree? Just refer it back to
I'm
staff.
going to recommend that the council, instead of approving, just receives. The council receives it, and that we direct planning staff to meet with stakeholders or whatever. I mean, we want it out there. If we send it back, then it's, anyways. So it would be, instead of recommend to council approval, we just say receipt of. Recommend to council receipt of the following, da-da-da, and further, the committee directs planning staff to undertake a stakeholder open house and report back to council.
That works.
How's that?
Yep, I like that.
Perfect.
Is that- Everybody happy with that? Does everybody understand the motion?
Yes.
There's my.
There's mine.
Which one, Mr. Chair? No, it's okay. Yes.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. We'll have to write that.
On the amendment?
Yeah, we'll deal with that. Okay. I have a motion by Counselor, pardon me, we have two additional items. Counselor Junkin, you asked that we put an item to deal with culverts.
Yes, thank you very much.
Carry on.
Finally, at the end of the night, we talk about something exciting. In Pelham. You had a phone call on the weekend from a taxpayer, lives on Chandler Road. He took me for a truck ride around Friday night, and we went down to a culvert on Chandler that is a very frightening thing to see. It has absolutely no shoulder going across the culverts. If you were to meet on that culvert and if you were just to get an inch off the road, you would be in the bottom of a 4-foot ditch. And I'm not an engineer, but it's quite easy to see that culvert should have been 2 feet longer on each side of the road so that the shoulder could have been tapered up better. Whatever reason, obviously an engineer will have something to say, but I think it's something that should be looked at the sooner the better. And he also went down to Sumbler Road, and there's a culvert there. Again, I'm talking quite a ways in from Church Street. I don't know that part of the town that well. I should. And it's the same situation again. The culvert, as far as I'm concerned, of what looks evident, is that the culvert was too short when it was installed, and you can't bring the shoulder up in a nice gradual way. That's the one thing I want to talk about. In the B section would be that I'm wondering if, as some kind of policy, if we shouldn't go forward, and of course the director can comment on this, with a policy that whenever we replace a culvert in the town, considering the amount of rain or climate change perhaps, if instead of replacing the culverts, let's say if it's a 12-inch culvert, we should make it a policy to go up 50%. Because if you go from a 12-inch culvert to an 18-inch culvert, you double its capacity for water. So, and the cost of a 12-inch culvert to an 18-inch culvert would be minimal. And the same thing again, it's not the price of the culvert, it's the installation that is the big thing. So I'm just wondering what council would think about and of course, the director would think of a policy like that going forward.
What I'm sensing here, Counselor, is perhaps this is something that should be referred to staff, specifically for Chandler and Sumler to at least go out there
Yes.
and have a look at the safety issues and what can be done to remediate that, if anything.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, as far as a policy with respect to replacement, I know we've talked about trying to make the town resilient in the significant weather events, and that may be something that we should be looking at, and perhaps we could have staff to bring forward a report on that as well, rather than us try to hash it out here, refer it back to them for their expertise.
Excellent, yes, thank you.
Happy with that?
Yep, thank you.
Councilor Ribbiak, comments?
Thank you. I think that's an excellent idea, but perhaps we can add into that report some commentary with respect to best practices about putting in culverts. I think we can all recall hearing a presentation from the previous drainage superintendent who talked about the need to submerge at least the bottom part of culverts so that water hitting it hits the culvert at the widest point, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to get into the details of it. But as long as we're looking at that question, perhaps that engineering might be included in that discussion so that when we get to a policy, we know that it's going to, as you put it, be a resilient policy going into the future.
Madam Director, are you happy with the direction that we've thrown your way here? Is it clear?
I am. The culvert design and installation is quite heavily documented. For standards, we're pretty strict on what the requirements are, whether it be internal staff or a contractor installing. It's an Ontario provincial standard that points to an MTO drainage requirement. So current practices going forward, these kind of installations don't happen anymore. It's very heavily controlled, how the length is chosen, how the banks are chosen, how the inspection of that installation goes. To have a policy that's blanketing to say we want to do better than that, especially for capacity, is dangerous because of the engineering requirements that go into calculating what those flows are required. We could certainly say we want to build in a bigger safety factors, if you will, to be a little bit more conservative, but that would be done through the design process rather than giving a firm number. We could certainly look into that and maybe what some more conservative approaches are. But I think there should be, we spoke a little bit about this, a comfort going forward that, and currently, that this doesn't happen anymore. There's a legacy of installations that have happened in the past that we are, through road patrols and inspections, trying to get caught up on, and we always appreciate that feedback and try to prioritize those repairs in for sure.
Thank you very much for the clarity. Mr. Mayor, I saw you waving
Yeah.
at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this part of this, in my mind, harkens back to a discussion we had last year when we had a couple of culverts that collapsed. The response we received at that time was that we do inspect culverts, et cetera. So I guess what I'm interested in is again, taking it to the next level, as Councillor Junkin started the discussion, and saying, you know what, how are our culverts? And maybe it's a consideration for, there might be a few like these two that need to be replaced immediately and something done. There might be another couple. Okay, staff will do that and tell us about it. But are there some, how many next year do we have to do? And it's similar to the ash board kind of thing. So we don't have to have the answer now. What I'm interested in is, how often do we inspect our culverts? How many legacy culverts are there, as you call it? It's a good term for it. And how are we going to deal with them? That's all.
So it appears that we were looking for a broad-based report dealing with culverts and maybe the standards and how often we inspect and the types of safety issues we look for, all of that sort of stuff, so that we can make informed decisions going forward when we deal with the budget and what we might look forward to in the budget in coming years. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, you happy with that, the way it's being dealt with? Okay. All right. Wonderful. Don't blow kisses, please. Okay, next issue is Councillor Pat. You raised the issue of AMO and a town promotional plan around that. And would you like to speak to it?
Sure, very quickly. I'd like our mayor, CEO, and staff to come back, hopefully by July 6th, if it's not too late, to put together a I want to call it marketing protocol, to let the delegates at AMO know exactly what we're all about, what we've done. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't showcase what I think has been major developments in this area, and I'll give the example. I can't think of right now in the 12 municipalities, and you, Mr. Mayor, said original, anybody that's doing this type of work with the community center, East Fonthill. I know there was a factory outlet built a year or so ago, but the excitement and the way in which we undertake business is something that I'd like our colleagues to at least showcase. Now, it may be too late. Maybe they've set in place how they're going to market, how they're going to publicly, take people around here. But if it can't be done, it can't be done. But it just behooves us that they're here in our backyard here in less than 2 months. And we have a golden opportunity to be able to show, give them what I think has been extraordinary work. And that's just my humble opinion. Last year, as you recall, with FCM, where there was, Councillor Durley mentioned, there were some tours taken and that was at a national level. But at the same token, there's a lot of stuff that people really should know what we're doing, and it's particularly trying to attract and create that kind of atmosphere in our community. So Summerfest, I can go on with the whole list. So I'll leave it up to the creative genius of Anna and of the staff to come up with what we could possibly do. And I'm not sure, Mr. CEO, whether there has to be there's a planning committee, I know, with AMO that does all this stuff. I don't know whether we can feather ourselves in there somehow, Mr. Mayor. What I'm driving at is, I know they're going to go to Niagara-on-the-Lake, they're going to go to the falls, and I'm thinking, we're the heart. We've got stuff going on here. In less than 4 days, we're going to break ground on a major development. Why not tell the rest of the province what we're doing? That's my thoughts at this point. Plus, the fact that, with all due respect, the treasurer and the staff the other night using the system that you've been using for solving problems with our organizations, we've talked about this before, is sharing with our colleagues how we go about doing both internal and public policy making. Be worthwhile to give people just a small little snippet of how that is affected. Because I'm asked about that from time to time. How do you do it? What do you do? How do you come to these decisions? And Carrie and Kim the other night did a fantastic problem with a regional organization, as difficult as it was, and they understood it. And it became, what was a complex situation has now become much more easier to deal with. So AMO, I thought, it won't be back here probably for another, I don't know, it could be another 10 years. Who knows, Mr. Mayor? I have no idea. But while they're here, why don't we just make the best effort possible? I'll arrange things with Molson's. No, don't write that down. So if you don't mind, if you can just give us some sort of a game plan, and maybe, I don't know, Mr. CEO or Mr. Mayor can find out. If they've already set the agenda, that's fine, but
We'll report back.
it'd be interesting to see what we could do there on site at the convention center. Thank you.
Just a comment. It's interesting, with FCM, there was lots of activity
Right.
and involvement across the
Right.
region. There's nothing with this.
Zero.
And there's, I think FCM has a number of study tours, 15, 16, whatever, and we had that discussion at council about getting some of the study tours through Pelham.
AMO's got
But there's only like 3 study tours. It's mostly concurrent sessions and that. The CAO and I have had discussions about, can we get the creative problem-solving process documented, talked about, et cetera, at AMO, and other great initiatives that we're doing, and we haven't got there yet. But we will certainly, report back on it. But again, I haven't heard it. I think this might be done by the city of Niagara Falls as opposed to the region itself.
It's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
We'll look into it.
So we'll direct it. Staff's got the direction. and-
Yeah, I just think it's a great opportunity for us to stand out front and say, this is what a small community has been able to do. Thank you
bringing that
for your
forward.
consideration for that.
Appreciate
Thank you.
that. Thank you. Okay. Motion by Councilor Duncan that this regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adjourned until the next regular Committee of the Whole scheduled for Monday, July the 6th, 2015, unless sooner called by the mayor. All those in favor? Opposed? Awesome. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Are you going over for?